everyone to Caleb Watches Movies, the channel where I, Caleb, randomly select from one of the many movies that I own and I watch and review them for you, unlike days like today where I pick a certain topic or genre and I rank the crap out of it. And with that intro music and that intro montage, that means it's only one thing. This is the annual end of the year 2024 ranking of all of these superhero slash comic book properties that were released in the year of 2024. This is an annual ranking video that I have done at the end of each year since I started in 2017. It's the longest annual tradition that I've been doing on this channel, and it's my favorite genre. I love superheroes, I love comic book movies. When I was growing up, it would be the best thing in the world when the next superhero or comic book movie was released in theaters, because back then, you see, we would get one, maybe two a year. Unlike in 2008 when Marvel Studios just decided to recreate the movie serial basically, but in a longer format. So now we get so many different comic book and superhero properties every year, and I feel obliged to rank every single one of them because that's what all of you people want. You want to know what's best between two things. We can't all just be happy with one thing. We have to rank everything. That's not an insult to you guys. I like ranking things too. Now, please know that this list is based solely on properties that are connected to a movie cinematic universe. So comic book properties that have a TV show or an online show somewhere, I am not counting in this ranking. So shows like Superman and Lois, The Boys, Invincible are not going to be on this list. I am not shunning them because they're terrible. Those are all great things. Again, I'm just focusing on movies. This is a movie review channel, and all of these superhero comic book properties that are on this list, there are 15 different properties that are on this list, have some type of connection to a cinematic universe. And if you disagree with me on that once this list is revealed, well then, I'm sorry, this is my list. And I am also not going to include Creature Commandos in on this list because as of this recording, there are still 2 or 3 more episodes left in the series, I think. That's going to end mid-January. And in my opinion, I don't think you should be judging or evaluating or ranking anything until said thing is completely over. One thing that's been driving me crazy all year is after the first episode of a series is released, all of a sudden you get the Rotten Tomatoes scores. And I'm like, there's like 10 episodes. You're judging this based on the first episode? That is not cool. So this guy is going to take in the entire picture of Creature Commandos and put that in on my ranking in the year of 2025. Good old DCU year, getting started. So enough of me blabbering. I say we get to my list. There were 15 different cinematic superhero comic book properties that were released in theaters, connected to a movie, some on streaming. Yeah, we'll get into it. Here we go, starting the list off at number 15. So at 15, for those of you that have watched my worst of 2024 list, you already know what's going to be at the bottom of this list. It can't be anything other than Sony's Spider-Verse Spider-Villain without Spider-Man movie franchise. Of course, we're talking Madam Web. I'm done talking about this movie. I feel like I've talked about this movie a lot, especially when it comes to the other Sony Spider-Villain non-Spider-Man movies that have been released. Talking about Spider-Verse, other Spider-Man properties. I'm tired of talking about this movie because it's so goddamn bad. And it's bad because it's a lie. It promoted these spider women in these spider suits taking on this non-Spider-Man Spider-Man person, and we don't get any of that. The promotional material that we get of these women in the suits happens in the last 10 seconds, and it's a dream sequence. Not to mention that Dakota Johnson she's just not a good actress. There is no emotion. I can't connect with her at all. There is nothing on her face. She's giving me nothing as a performer. And then not to mention that the entire plot just feels like it was generated by some AI chat GPT type thing. And Sony decides to put millions of dollars behind this thing and it makes nothing. It is the joke of 2024. I'm done talking about it. By far the worst. Let's move on. At number 14 is a sequel to a film from 14 years ago. The first film I actually really liked, and thinking about it, it was the first movie that I saw in theaters that was in 3D. Of course, 3D, I'm not a huge fan of in general, but you know what? I remember these things. But then Peacock or Paramount, I'm pretty sure it was Peacock, wanted to regenerate the whole Megamind idea in franchise, so they did it with the release of a movie called Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. Now, the animation looks pretty similar. You can tell that it's on more of a shoestring budget than it had when it was an actual film release. So you look in the background, there's not a lot of characters, there's not a lot of detail in those shots. And of course, they didn't get any of the original cast back because, again, this is a movie made for kids and made for television. They're not looking at a box office return, they're looking at just hits and streams on their streaming service. Basically, when it comes to this movie, think of how Return of Jafar was to the franchise of Aladdin. Many years ago, Disney wanted to release an entire cartoon series of Aladdin, but they didn't want to pay all of the big-time actors that they had for the movie, so they redesigned things, they recast things, and what we got, like, it's okay for, you know, a kid's show, but if you're looking for something substantial, you're definitely going to be disappointed. Same thing with Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. At number 13 is a series coming from the MCU that actually a lot of people I hear loved this show, but I just struggled and I couldn't get behind or care about anything that happened in this series. And it's a series that I'm thinking, like, why are we spending time on this when we could be spending time on bigger and more impactful characters and stories? I'm talking about Agatha All Along. I love Kathryn Hahn. I think she is a great actress and she is a brilliant comedian. She is a national treasure. I don't know what she is doing in this role. She is overacting like crazy. And I guess people like that. I don't. This is one of the few properties from Marvel for the whole MCU that it was a struggle for me coming back and caring and putting myself through each episode. At the end of each episode, I'm thinking that was, I don't know where this is going, and I don't care, because it's not playing into any big picture. And I know things don't have to be going into, like, a big picture or anything, but that's what the MCU built its brand on, and ever since the whole multiverse saga thing began, we've been leading to nothing, and it's just felt all stagnant, and it's not fun. And kind of the same thing with my whole issue with Madam Web and how the promotion of that movie was basically a lie. This series, this plot, The Witch's Road, spoiler alert, it's all a fucking lie. The whole thing happens because the Wiccan kid goes all crazy in his mind. And Agatha, Kathryn Hahn, just goes along with the entire thing, and we have to waste 8-9 episodes with a fucking lie. I just hate it. It's something that screenwriters do now where they're like, ooh, if we just switch everything and make everything a lie, oh, that's a great plot twist. No, it's just fucking annoying. That being said, there are some great moments in here. Actually, the entire episode that is Patti LuPone's episode where she is bouncing through time and they have the costumes of the Wizard of Oz and Wicked. That episode, I will give it to you. That episode is fantastic, but it is not enough to save this entire series for me and saying, oh yeah, this is definitely worth your time. If you're a Marvel fan and for some reason you're on the fence about not watching everything that Marvel puts out, I would tell you, nah, skip this one. I don't know what the point of it was. A kid gets a cool-ass costume in the end, and we get to see death for the first time in the MCU. That's it. At number 12 is another Spider-Villain, non-Spider-Man movie that just came out a couple of weeks ago. Of course, I'm talking about Kraven the Hunter. And I've talked about this film in length with my review that came out a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to try to shorten my thoughts. I feel like there is a story in here that is worth telling. I feel like there is the bare bones of something that really could have been great, but instead, Sony goes in and just throws in all of these Spider-Man nods and Spider-Man villains in here just because they have Spider-Man licenses to do anything Spider-Man without using Spider-Man. Aaron Taylor Johnson is doing his best Sam Winchester in his acting ability, where he just goes around and turns and goes, Yeah, I'm just looking so sexy and looking so concerned about everything. And of course, we have the terrible CGI of the Rhino. He's not in a mech suit this time, but I think in my review I said I would prefer the mech suit over the quality of CGI that we get with this big hulking man. Oh my god. What's really annoying is that this film was supposed to come out in December of 2023. November, December of that year. And they were like, you know what? We're going to give it a year and we're just going to let the hype build and we're going to take our time with the CGI. And it's going to come out in December 24th. And it's going to be amazing. And then we get shit like the CGI of the Rhino in this movie. I'm like, you took a year. You took a year. Give yourself extra time. And this is still what you gave us. Wow, I am so glad, Sony, you are completely done with this non-Spider-Man, Spider-Villain franchise bullshit that you've been feeding us for the last 5 or 7 years. It is done, thank God. Man, I didn't realize that I was going to have this versatile of a reaction to some of these things, but yeah, the bad of this year was so bad, but the goods were extremely good. And hopefully we're getting to them soon. At number 11 is the remake that has been talked about for, gosh, 30 years at least. And now that it's out, can we finally stop trying to remake The Crow? Because nothing is going to beat the Brandon Lee version that came out in 1993, I believe. I think Skarsgård is a good choice to play this character of this crow, this gangly, lengthy, gothy person. He fits that type really well. And just like in Craven, where I thought that there was a bare bones good story there, I do feel that there is, again, a good bare bones story somewhere in here that gets caught up in terrible editing choices. The editing of this movie is all over the place. When we're introduced to our main characters, it's just kind of like a throwaway, like, oh, yeah, there they are. They're in prison. Do we establish why they're in prison ever? No, not at all, but we watch them break free and form their love with each other, which actually are scenes that I quite enjoy. And there are also some very gory and violent fight scenes in here, especially in that opera house lobby, that I think, okay, that's pretty cool. Everything else here, though, has been done to death many times before in superhero films. Someone dies, someone sacrifices themselves, but then when they sacrifice themselves, they get to also live too, and, you know, goodness and things. Again, it just got caught up in terrible editing and terrible cinematography choices that, let's just be done. Let's be done with remaking this property. Let's move on. At number 10 is the last non-Spider-Man Spider-Villain movie I'm talking about on this list, and it's the final dance. It's the last dance for Venom here in the Sony non-Spider-Man Spider-Villain franchise. I love that title. I need to coin that. I keep using it, but they're not doing it anymore, so what's even the goddamn point? I'm a fan of the first Venom movie. It's one of those, this is just so terrible, but I'm having a great time this movies. Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage, though, is a film that I absolutely despise. I actually went back to watch it for this movie because it's just been so long since those films came out, and I was quickly reminded about how choppy and how terribly paced and how the story just doesn't make sense in that one, to where we get to this movie, and I have to say I think this is the best of the Venom trilogy that we got, mainly because we're not focused on a bullshit love story between Venom, Eddie Brock, and his ex-wife. Instead, we have a cosmic being called Null, or Knull, out in the universe, sitting on his throne, looking for the codex that apparently Venom is. So he sends his CGI monstrous watchdogs throughout the universe searching for it. And then when they find it, the watchdogs are the big baddie that try to get Venom. And then we have all these other Venoms, too, coming out because they're at the symbiote Area 51 place now. But then Venom sacrifices himself, so there's no more Venom, and there's no more of the Null Knull watchdogs. But then at the very end of that movie... there's Null, and he's like, I'll be back, my pretties, for your little dog, too. And I'm thinking, well, I don't think you are, because like the title of this movie says, this is the last dance. So there's no more of these. So you're just gonna be sitting there for the rest of eternity, bruh. Another instance of Sony just putting a Spider-Man piece of art out there for the world to consume. Apparently a lot of people love this one. They made a profit. They had a great box office run for this film, so good for them. Makes it all worth it for you, Sony. Please stop doing this Spider-Man shit. Give the rights to Marvel Studios. Get paid handsomely. Sell it for everything that it's worth and more. That way you get your money and you're happy, and that they get the properties of all Spider-Man stuff without having to deal with you people. Right? That would make us, the audience, very happy. So could you do that, please? At number 9 is probably the most hated property that came out this year. But I'm a weirdo, because I actually quite enjoyed this film. I understood all of the subtlety and what it was trying to do. Do I think it's as great as the first Joker installment? Oh, absolutely not. No, by far not. But in my opinion, Joker Folie à Deux, I think, is a unique and risk-taking sequel that I actually enjoyed. I definitely understand why people out there do not enjoy this movie. It didn't advertise itself as a musical, and people went in, and once they heard the terrible singing from Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga singing in vocal fry, they were like, nope, and they walked out. Happened in my viewing. There was no one there in the theater, basically. I think there were like us and then 2 other like families or couples there, and one of the families just got up, I would say about 20 minutes in, got up and left. I get it. I completely understand it. But for me, it worked for me. And in an industry where we get the same plotting stories and the same messages over and over and over again, to see a movie take its property and go the complete opposite direction in it and do something unique, like a jukebox musical like this, I don't know, I think it's to be commended. This movie is definitely not worth the $250 million budget that it had. The reason why the first movie was so great is because that one, I believe, had a budget of like $50 million, something very small when it comes to Hollywood. But then the powers that be, before DC Studios was a thing and James Gunn and Peter Safran came in, the film department threw out all the money at this, thinking that they were going to make their money back with the challenging concept of making this a musical. And yeah, that didn't work. At number 8 is the reason why it's taken me so long to come out with this review, is because Marvel was like, hey, we're going to release the episodes of this series for the last 8 days of the year, and we did that last year and it was great. But what Marvel Studios fails to realize is that some YouTubers, movie YouTubers like myself, like to get these things done in advance so I can enjoy the holiday, so that I'm not here a couple days before New Year's Eve stressing about getting this review and ranking out for everyone. God, just release it at the beginning of December next time, please. Of course, I'm talking What If Season 3. And this is the final season of this series. We're not going to get any more What If tales, and I say good on ya. I've been saying this since the first season of What If came out in 2021. This idea and the episodes that we get in here, it's cool, right? These are all really cool things. It's really cool seeing, oh, what if this character got all the Infinity Stones? Or what if this character took the Super Soldier Serum? Or what if these 2 characters, who are on complete ends of the world and have no business being together, what if they got together and went on a mission? All of these ideas are really cool. But when you introduce the concept of a multiverse, and the audience realizes, oh, there are an infinite number of different versions of this character, well, if something happens to that character in this particular story or this particular universe, I'm just not going to care, because I know that there's an infinite number of other versions of that character out there in the universe. And that's been my biggest criticism ever since they introduced the concept of the multiverse in Loki Season 1 in 2001. And I think it's been biting them in the ass ever since, because I think other people have been feeling like how I've been feeling. Oh, is this thing coming out? Is this part of the sacred timeline? Or if this actor is cast as this role, are they like the actual version? Or is this just another version that if something happens to them, we're not going to care about? So hopefully with this series coming to an end and us getting Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars here in the next couple years, we can put an end to this whole multiverse thing, and we can just shrink the universe down to one universe, and everyone who is cast in the role is going to be the permanent character going forward, and then we can get back to the greatness that was the MCU from the Infinity Saga. The big reason why I enjoyed this for what it was is because I got to see the return of different characters that I haven't seen for 4 years, because Marvel Studios has been focused on generating other new characters, and characters like Shang-Chi, who did pretty goddamn well in the box office considering it was COVID. Hasn't gotten a sequel, hasn't been announced that there was going to be a sequel. We haven't seen this character really in anything since then. So it's nice to see him in this Western, especially with Kate Bishop as Hawkeye. Those are great characters together. And Haley Steinfeld is an amazing actress. So yeah, let's use them while we have them. Again, in the end with this series, reason why it's higher up on the list is because, hey, the episodes are cool. They really are cool. There's just nothing weighty in there that's keeping me coming back for more or wanting more. At number 7 is a Marvel Studios property that was released on Disney Plus back in January. Do y'all remember this show called Echo? Yeah, I bet you forgot about it just as much as I did. But after remembering what happens in this show and how it's introducing this Echo character and getting her a flashy new suit and representing her Native American heritage, and we see that through the cinematography and the storytelling, I'm reminded that, oh yeah, this show is actually quite beautiful. Plus, we get the reintroduction of Wilson Fisk, Vincent D'Onofrio's version of the Kingpin. He's shot in the eye, through the head at the end of Hawkeye, but you know, this is superhero stuff. That ain't gonna kill someone. Instead, he has an eye patch, so yep. But I do enjoy this series for its unique story and its unique storytelling, and it's focusing on a female character in the MCU and embracing the feminine archetypes that this show showcases. And it's also a great representation of ASL, just seeing that in this majorly produced show, produced the biggest company in the world, basically. I think this film has a lot of great messages behind it, and if you did forget about it, I'd say give it another watch. I think it's better than what you remember. At number 6 is a property that is not related to DC, it's not related to Marvel, it's its own thing. Came out on Netflix early on in 2024. This is Ultraman Rising. It's a movie about establishing your own legacy while paying respects to those that came before you in that same profession. Now, I didn't grow up on Ultraman, but I know it's basically the same thing as Power Rangers, which was my jam when I was a kid. It's this guy in this big mech suit taking on a couple of kaijus all throughout Japan. Except one of the kaijus has an adorable little baby who, you know, is growing, and when they start off very, very small, you can fit them in your arms, and then all of a sudden they're growing to the size of a house. Yeah, you start freaking out, but I love the relationship between Ultraman and this baby kaiju, and how that strengthens the relationship between Ultraman and his father, the first Ultraman. It does suck for Ultraman, though, becoming a father without any of the fun. But there are absolutely great lessons to learn while becoming an adopted father. It's a hidden gem. Go check it out on Netflix. It's great. At number 5 is a movie that was not everyone's cup of tea, but me being familiar with the source material, reading it actually before watching this film, and really loving the appreciation of the adaptation from comic book strip to film, I think this film is much better than people give it credit for. And that is Hellboy, the Crooked Man. Now, I think because it doesn't have the artistic sensibilities and the name behind it of a Guillermo del Toro, this film is definitely panned by a lot of people. But in my opinion, this film sacrifices spectacle and grandeur and amazing CGI and artistry. It sacrifices all of that for a well-in-depth story. That's really what this entire movie was, just people telling stories about the Crooked Man or the witch who came around when they were kids. And we get all of these side characters' backstory that I felt really connected to. I really enjoyed this film, and I wish other people out there would have given it a fair chance. But I feel like because it didn't have Guillermo del Toro behind it, everyone was like, oh, can we just stop doing this and just do Hellboy 3 from Guillermo del Toro? God, this film's gonna suck. And clearly, everyone felt that way due to its box office. This film was a complete failure when it came to making its money back. But I found a lot of enjoyment in this rendition of Hellboy and its adaptation from the source material to screen. I think it's commendable, and I really enjoyed this film. At number 4 is a movie not based on a superhero or comic book character, but it's definitely about the man who embodied probably the most famous superhero of all time, and through his life and through his tragedy, how he inspired several people out there and has helped people out there walk again due to the charity that is in his name. This film is called Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. One of the best documentaries that I've ever seen, and my wife and I went to a special screening of this before before they did a wide release in the theater back in October of this year, and I had heard several things about how emotional this movie is and how impactful it is and how special it is. And I'll be honest, watching it, getting through the majority of it, I'm like, I'm not connecting to this emotionally. At least I'm not crying. I'm not feeling the need to cry and break down up until when we get the footage from the funeral and we see people get up there like his wife and his friend Robin Williams just break down. That's when I started crying. Like, holy crap, this really was truly sad. And then terribly, after Christopher Reeve passes away, 6 months later, his wife passes away from lung cancer, and she'd never smoked a cigarette or a cigar in her life. It was just a random freakish thing. But to see this man who was dealt the shittiest hand you could possibly be dealt as a human on this planet, but still had the hope and the passion and the strength to carry on and still directed films, carried on and still supported and did fundraisers and charities to help establish research so that people like himself could be able to walk again. But then after their passing, seeing how their impact and their legacy has been transferred to their 3 children and how they're passionate about establishing these charities and raising all this money and establishing all this research, this film is inspiring. There is hope, there is beauty out of this terrible tragedy that happened to this person who is connected to this role of Superman. Like, you can't get away from it. When you think of Superman, one of the first things everyone in the world thinks about is Christopher Reeve. That's how important this person was to this character, and that's how important this person was to the world. And number 3 is an animated series that really touched at my nostalgia. It starts off in the same style from the X-Men cartoon from the 1990s, but then it generates itself into this new, brand new, crisper animation as the series goes along. Of course, I'm talking about X-Men 97. Now, I'm sure you're saying out there, well, Caleb, that's not connected to the sacred timeline. That's not connected to the MCU. Caleb, what are you doing, you dumb fuck? And I have my reason, because in episode 5, the whole Genosha battle and the sacrifice of Gambit, before all of the terrible things start happening in that episode, we do see the Watcher out there amongst the stars in the sky. So Watcher was watching, and if the Watcher's watching, it's part of What If. And What If, I just ranked it, it's been a part of the MCU, it's on the timeline, so therefore, ergo, this series belongs on this list. Plus, I also just wanted to talk about it because it's one of the best things that has been released, whether it's superheroes or not. This is one of the best artistic TV series that has been released in 2024. And if you don't believe me, just watch episode 5, Remember It, and see their sacrifice of Gambit. I mean, just watch that episode and you'll be 100% convinced of why it's so high on this list. But I just loved hearing majority of the original cast coming back. Those that were still here came back to voice these characters, and where it takes these characters and where it's going. I mean, we're going to get a season 2 of this, but just going back and watching a couple episodes of the original series, you know, it's made for kids. This is simple. This is joyful. There's a good, happy ending at the end of each, like, mini arc that we get in the series. In here, not so much. People are sacrificed, people are maimed, people are killed, and through all of that, we get some of the most touching and beautiful moments from characters like Magneto and Professor X, of course. There's a whole character arc of Storm regaining her power and reestablishing herself and fighting her fears. One of the scariest things that I've seen in the history of movies and in shows is that owl monster that kept following her around. I don't know the name of it. If you think I would be a good superhero and comic book nerd, I would know it, but I don't want to because the thing freaks me out so bad. And we even have good moments between Jubilee and Sunfire. Jubilee is not one of my favorite characters, especially from this iteration and the TV show from the 90s, but everyone has their moments. This show surprised so many people. It's been nominated for Emmys, for Golden Globes. This show is special, and my hope is that maybe for films like Secret Wars, maybe Doomsday, if we're doing this multiverse thing, that a couple of the iterations of these characters find their way to live action in those movies, because this show needs to be represented. It's fantastic. At number 2 is definitely the best film that has come out that is involved in comic book or superheroes this year, a movie that I could go back and watch endlessly because it's endlessly hilarious. It has great messages, it has a great impact, and you get to see just a lovable bromance on screen that is just gorgeous. And of course, I'm talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. It's a movie that I've been going back to watch on repeat. I watched it several times in the theaters, and I've gone back to watch it several times since it's been released on digital and 4K. This film is hilarious. Ryan Reynolds is fantastic, and Hugh Jackman is hilarious in his own way. But getting to see him in the yellow, blue, and black suit finally after 24 years, it's a really special moment. And then plus all the little cameos of other Fox superhero characters that were kind of just diminished and thrown away due to the whole Disney and Fox merger. It's great to see them as well. But like I said, the best thing about this film is seeing this love and this relationship between these two characters of Wade Wilson and Logan, but also seeing the bromance and the love between the actors behind them of Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. They developed a kinship and a friendship with each other ever since the release of the first Deadpool movie. They wanted to get together to make a film, but Hugh Jackman had said, no, after Logan, that's going to be my last outing. But, you know, the power of the almighty dollar and franchise and residuals, it keeps people coming back for more. Not to mention that opening sequence with the whole bye 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 in sync fight scene, that's just one of the best opening scenes, I think, definitely in the MCU, but maybe of all time in the history of movies. It's just so goddamn good. Some people could be harsh on this movie, just thinking that, oh, it's just humor and it's the same stuff that we've seen over and over and over again. I don't think so at all. This film just puts a gigantic smile on my face. It made my wife laugh and smile in the theater. We both just had a great time, and I feel like everyone that is going to see this movie has had the exact same great time that we had. But app number one is definitely not a superhero property. It's a comic book property, of course. But this series was absolute must-see television every Sunday when each episode was released. This is the next chapter in the Batman franchise called The Penguin. This is something that just takes the comic book superhero genre and elevates it to a level where it's not just silly people in silly costumes. No, this is a substantial story that is thought-provoking, that takes risks, that has stakes, that really changes the game when it comes to a streaming service series. There was a point there halfway through the series where watching this every Sunday, that was the thing everyone was talking about around the water cooler at their job on Monday after it was released. It was The Sopranos, it was the Game of Thrones effect, where everyone around the world came to watch this series. Colin Farrell is unrecognizable as the Penguin. He is brilliant, he is excellent, but then we're introduced to the Hangman, played by Kristen Milotti, and really this series almost becomes entirely hers. That's how amazing and incredible she was. You know, it was just released that the Batman Part 2 had been delayed another year, so we're not going to be getting that until October of 2027. So it makes me want to cherish, go back, and take my time watching this series again that much more, because I love this universe that Matt Reeves is creating. He didn't direct any of the episodes for this series, but he was producing it, he was behind it. Of course, this entire version of Batman in Gotham City came from his mind. So I love seeing these different writers and different artists come in and expand on that, but still stays true to the wonderful world that Matt Reeves created. There are moments in this show that anchor you. There are points where you are completely behind Oz and want him to achieve his goals and take out this person. But then there are other points in this series when Oz does something that makes you, the audience, absolutely hate him. There is a moment in here where, you know, the show is called The Penguin, so it gives a little sympathy to him, but he does something in this series that makes everyone in the world who watched this show hate this guy. Just a blunt reminder of, oh yeah, this guy is a villain. He's a terrible person. We shouldn't be rooting for him, even though he is the protagonist of this series. Oh yeah, he's bad. He shouldn't be a role model for me. This is definitely one of the best things that DC has ever put out in an adaptation of live action, and it's an Elseworld tale, part of the DC Studios, so it's a home run when it comes to the DC Studios logo, how they're piggybacking on the success of this show. Just absolutely. It's the best thing that came out this year in terms of superhero and comic book properties. And that is my ranking of all of the superhero and comic book shows and movies that have come out in 2024. What did you think of my ranking? What is your ranking of all of these shows and movies? Whatever you thought, comment below. Let me know what you thought about them. And as always, if you like what you see here, if you like my take on movies, then hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that bell. See you the next time I'm releasing my next movie review. So guys, I will see you next time on the channel. I will see you next year in the year 2025. So in the meantime, be well, be good to each other, and go watch a movie. Take care, guys.